Welcome to the Waiting List podcast. Tell us a story.
It's like many things you start building from scratch.
And then I'm like, wait, I really do like watches because
You've seen so many watches that makes you excited.
I think I really do like watches.
Yeah. I think it's a great way to see if you are a watch enthusiast. Hi there, I'm Daniel, and welcome back to the Waiting List podcast, where I'll be the host today. As usual, I'm joined by my two co-hosts, Lung Lung and Jacqueline, and we are very fortunate to have Mr. John Reardon from the Collectability platform on the show today. So welcome, guys, and welcome, John, and thank you for making time for us.
Thank you so much. It's a complete honor to be with you today.
Right. So just in case there are listeners here who are not aware who John Reardon is, I'm just going to do a brief introduction so that the rest of the interview has some context. So as a teenager, and you can find most of this information on his website at collectability.com, John learned the art of clockmaking at the American Watch and Clock Museum in his hometown of Bristol, Connecticut, before working at Sotheby's, New York, and then later the Henry Stern Watch Agency, which is in essence Patek Philippe USA. It's the distributor for Patek in America. He then spent 5 years leading Christie's Watches as international head of watches before launching Collectability in 2019. Somehow, he's also managed to find time to write 3 books, including Patek Philippe in America, marketing the world's foremost watch, Patek Philippe Reference Guide, men's wristwatches, and the Patek Philippe Reference Guide, ladies' watches 2012. So, John, did I miss anything there?
No, thank you. Thank you so much. It makes
podcast,
me sound like I'm quite old, I think.
Well, in this podcast, we do talk about productivity and maximizing one's productivity. And I think you've just wiped the floor with us. But there's a lot to cover in this interview that I've actually had to break it up. So there's actually 2 interviews with John. And this interview focuses more on John, and the second one is more Patek Philippe focused. So let's go straight into the first question. As you know, I actually know you from the book because that's my first connection with you. I was very kindly gifted it as a present from our mutual friend. And I wanted to know, what made you feel like writing a book on Patek Philippe, especially the specific topic of Patek Philippe in America?
It all started with my personal collection of Patek Philippe advertisements, which I started putting together in the late 90s. With the rise of eBay, I couldn't afford to buy watches obsessively, but I could afford the advertisements. I soon found, and this was during the period of time I was working for Patek Philippe USA, I had over 1,000 advertisements in my collection. So I put some of them together and showed Mr. Philippe Stern, and I'll never forget the meeting in Geneva. I made some prototype books of the project, and asked if he'd be interested in being part of this project in any way, or more importantly, I could have permission as an employee of Patek Philippe to write a book. He soon gave his blessing, which was, I was such an honor and pleasure to be able to work on this project. Yet here was the deal. The deal was, it was my own time, my own money, and Patek Philippe would have no official involvement in the book itself. So it took years to put this together. The first book, which is essentially a 400-page tome of the history of the company, decade by decade, really focusing on the American side of the story through the advertisements. And it is a marketing story. It's a marketing success story of how this unknown brand from Switzerland was able to have market penetration in the US in a relatively short amount of time. And the consistency of the message from the 19th century, even through today, was fascinating to me. So that's how it all began. And I have to say, one of the, my professional highlight is this, and only this. They put my book as part of the official Patek Philippe library. So when you went to the Patek Philippe Museum, you were able to see Patek Philippe in America. And for a short amount of years, because there was only 1,500 copies of the book, every Patek Philippe watch you'd buy would have a picture of the book within it, alongside the Banbury books. And for me, Huber and Banbury, that's the Bible. This was an honor that I'll never forget. And it was just a footnote to my professional experience that I have to say it was a high water mark. That was a complete honor.
Yeah. So, John, you've dedicated your whole life to watches. When I look at your career, you never actually were in any other industry apart from watches. You got there and you stayed there all the time. How does it feel for what many people, Patek Philippe being the pinnacle watch brand out there, being recognized like that by the brand?
Oh, I mean, Patek Philippe, first and foremost, there are no heroes in the world of Patek Philippe other than the Stearns, in my opinion. It's a family-run company. It's all about them. It's only recently people are starting to talk about historical figures and people that have worked within the company. But traditionally, they didn't want to talk about regulators. They didn't want to talk about some of their best watchmakers. They didn't want to talk about any of the employees. Now we're starting to see some changes where people are talking about some of the people behind the curtain within Patek Philippe, and there are those that know much more about the company than I do. So I'm humbly tickled that people would even mention my name in the same sentence as Patek Philippe. But I've had the experience over the years of meeting some of the people that are really the movers and shakers within the company. And it's just been a pleasure being the right place at the right time, meeting some of these people. I mean, I remember I was in a room with George Daniels and Philippe Stern arguing about escapements in Basel. And I felt like I was Forrest Gump. I was like the right place at the right time, seeing these titans. And that's what's so much fun about this world is the more you learn about it and you're part of it. And now in the digital universe, you could connect to individuals you thought you could never speak to before. And that's what's such a pleasure in this industry.
I think you're quite humble in the fact that you said it took a few years for you to make the bait. It actually took you 10 years, right? Rougher there.
Yes, from the start of the collection to the book finally being in print. It took a while.
But I've got a question just for leading on from that. There's a lot of people that want to have Patek Philippe watches now. They can't afford the watches. Mm-hmm. They want to collect something from Patek Philippe. Are the prices of those original advertisements going up? Are they actually collectible themselves?
They are. They have gone up. And I'm very fortunate to have bought them at a time where I think I only had one competitor. A gentleman, I'll name him too. He's a friend now. His name's Mark Berliner in Los Angeles, and he and I, we would battle it out. I had no clue who he was. He didn't know who I was, and we'd battle these ads from $5 to $20. It was a tight battle of the titans, you could say, of pennies, and it was a ton of fun back then because there wasn't so many people collecting these, but now it's almost a business. There's You're probably familiar with Ad Patina in Chicago. They do an amazing job sourcing and framing and presenting vintage advertisements, many from Patek Philippe and Rolex. So this is a collecting category in itself, and you could still buy some of the best ads ever made in the history of Patek Philippe for still under $10, sometimes for more of the more rare ones, sometimes $100, but it's still very affordable.
John, there is a local watch maker in Vancouver, and I visited their store once or twice over the past couple of months, and they used to be a authorized watchmaker for Patek Philippe.
Yes.
In the late 80s and 90s. I think it's a family business. It's been there for a long time. And then as soon as you walk into the door, on the right of the wall, there is this huge newspaper printing of, and you got to remind me, it's like one of the most complicated pocket watches made in the 80s or 90s. I think it's a 2-number reference.
Must be this one, caliber 89.
Yes, 89. I was gonna say like 90 something, but yeah, it's 89. And it's the newspaper printout of the history of the caliber 89 and a lot of sketchings and drawings, and it's framed. It's huge. So I was like, oh my God, this is original. And they said, yeah, Patek sent us one of those in the before the 2000s when it was being made in production. Obviously very, very limited and rarely. And they sent it because we were an authorized certified watchmaker. I was like, oh my God, you should just keep that. I mean, this is the best thing. It's the coolest thing I've seen in a watchmaker store. And they're like, yeah, we're very happy to have it.
That is
So
so cool. You must be speaking about Brinkhouse, if I could say their name, in
uh
Vancouver.
not Brinkhouse. It's a place called Autofredo. It's basically like a family ran um only like a watchmaker. They don't really sell watches. They have a bunch of vintage selection, but then they just service watches. Brinkhouse, I think it's an authorized retailer,
Retailer,
right?
correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I had the pleasure of going to Calgary and Vancouver while I was working at Patek Philippe to visit the Patek ADs and
Yeah,
have fond
yeah,
memories, especially of Vancouver.
yeah. Brinkhouse and Burke's. Those are
Yeah.
the two. Yeah.
For all the listeners listening, what differentiates John book between Patek Philippe's authorized biography is that it tells the story through marketing material. So you see, I would say, I've read both books. Very marked difference is it's totally feels like John's book comes from the consumer end. You really get what the consumer was seeing through the ads. And because of that, the way these adverts were crafted, it's very romantic. You know, it really does put you back into that time, that era, which I would say you don't get that full feeling when you read the biography. You get more of the inner workings of what's happening in Patek Philippe and less about the consumer side. So I think reading both books, you get a really balanced view on what Patek Philippe was trying to do, and then also what actually the consumer felt. It is, they have something that's really highlighted is the relationship with the retailers in John's book. There's so many, and then each had their own, devising their own advertising, which wasn't perhaps as controlled as it is now with Patek Philippe, where they control a lot of that brand message. So you get to see how that brand evolved in the American market. But moving on to the next question, what other watch books would you recommend? Clearly, you're an expert. So what would you actually recommend on Patek Philippe or any other kind of, to get a good idea of watches?
Wow, off the top of my head, first, of course, you need to have both Huber and Banbury's books, the wristwatches and pocket watches. Followed by that, you mentioned Nick Falk's book, the authorized Patek Philippe book. That is a must-have. Beyond that, and these books are getting hard to get. There's the Patek Philippe Museum Catalog Raisonné, which is a 2-volume set, which is really, I think, an important piece to have. And if you could find it, I'll put it that way. Beyond that, John Goldberger's book, Steel Watches, Patek Philippe is just it's beautiful. I mean, it's bound in cork like a nautilus and has some very important information in it. Dr. Helmut Krott has a relatively new book. It's 2 years out called Cadron on the history of dials. For the French speakers out there, which I am not, I highly recommend this book. And if you can get your hands on it, it's also a challenge to find this. But with this, I mean, there's about 10 books you could have where you have a very complete Patek Philippe library. And of course, there's lots of information digitally and online, but these books are the bedrock. You need to have these as visual references. And there's plenty of information in these books that are not in print.
Well, what we need to do is like long. Yeah, like you need to make sure that this episode is not released before we get to look
I
for
know.
these books,
I told Jacqueline,
right? Because
like
we're
even
gonna
regarding
shoot ourselves in the foot.
Dude, I can't see anything from your side.
Okay, let me go turn on the light.
Okay,
wait, can I just say, before I forget the questions, right? Like this question, it's completely not related to watches, but it's about printing.
I just want to know, like, clearly you guys know, like, there's a higher demand for the books than what's being supplied. Like, why don't they just print more?
Oh, that's a good point. I think just from my own experience, my book was self-published. I went to many of the major publishing houses in New York and told them I wanted to do a coffee table book on the history of Patek Philippe. And on Madison Avenue, they literally laughed at me. They're like, we wouldn't consider a book unless we know we could sell 20,000 copies. And at that point of time, 20 years ago, it would have been hard to sell 20,000 copies of a book about Patek Philippe. Today, I think the story is different. I chose 1,500 copies because that's what I could afford to print. I mean, it was a really random number. And now for, I guess more for romantic reasons, like I don't want to print another copy because for the people that have the first copy, I think it's special. I don't want to do a digital copy of it because I think that kind of takes away from the original. And I recently saw an auction, a copy of one of my first books go for $900.
What?
I was laughing in hysterics. I was like, this is incredible. I told my kids they need to keep the book. So that's my personal experience. For others that have done books that sell out quickly, I do advise they do second printings. I mean, I think the even Nick's book is becoming quite hard to get, and I would expect that Patek Philippe will just do another. I think actually they will do another printing of it, and that makes sense. I think that more people, the better, that can have access to this material.
I think you said that there's 1,500 copies, and really what you're saying is you actually made 3,000 copies to keep 1,500 for yourself. So that now the price is up, and you could just you're just waiting for the right time to let them go, and you're going to let them go one by one. Last copy. I
wish I had the foresight to do that. It was
using all that auction knowledge to the maximum, hey?
Yeah, that is the classic auction play. I remember though, there was a time there was 6 books per box, and they were all sitting in our dining room. And my wife was like, when are these books going to leave the house? Because they were taking up so much room. So I eventually got a storage unit for them, but then they sold out, and then I had an empty storage unit, which I think I'm still paying for to this day.
I would like to apply to be the authorized dealer for Southeast Asia.
We'll send you 5 copies.
Oh my God.
John, you mentioned something just in your answer there, how information is now, via 10 books, you can have a very comprehensive understanding of the brand, and there is, limitless information online. How do you see those two sources of information? Like, do you prefer the books? Do you think the books are more reliable? Or do you think it's all out there on the internet, but it's all mixed in with hearsay, a bit of myth, and it also takes a long time to get through? I don't want to put the answer in your mouth, but I just want you to compare the two mediums. They
complement each other. I love the nimble, sometimes emotional aspect of information you find online as people react. A lot of information I read online, especially at various, if it's in a forum or someplace in a comment on Hodinkee, for example, I sometimes feel as though it could be market driven. Someone's trying to say their watch is better than yours, or there's always an angle. With most of the books that are out there today, it's more from an academic focus, where you're not being sold to. It's information that's being shared. But also always know the source and know why someone's educating you about that piece. And with collectability, the whole the mission statement is an education in vintage Patek Philippe. Yet I'm also selling you a watch, so it's as long as you go in knowing that. Of course, every story that you read, you are buying something special, unique, and amazing. But you also have to know that when you're being educated and sold at the same time, just go in eyes wide open. What's very cryptic today in the world's online digitally and with Instagram is people are often tricked when education and the commercial aspects are, let's just say the line is crossed and you just don't know what you're walking into. And I just let the buyer beware is always a very important message that needs to be shared.
Mhm.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
We're going to go into you now. So how did you get into watches and subsequently the industry? What was your first attachment?
It all began with my brother-in-law, Eric Matthews, who was dating my sister at the time. And he, as a teenager, he was a watch collector. I looked up to him. He taught me about watches 101. At first, I thought it was kind of a ridiculous hobby. I remember teasing him about it, like what kind of person would do this. But then it caught my imagination, and I fell in love with it quite quickly. And thanks to him, I visited my local museum, the American Watch and Clock Museum, which I think I might have been dragged to when I was 4 or 5, but couldn't care less. But when I went back with this basic knowledge, I quickly became obsessed, because it was a world where art, technology, history all combined in one. And then you add the aspect of treasure hunting.
Yes.
I became obsessed in high school, going to flea markets and buying and selling. Wow, I started doing that, I think, a freshman in high school. So I was 15, 16 years old. So it had a commercial element on top of all of the other more academic pursuits. And then the fact that I knew how to repair them and fix them, that's so much fun, is that when you could find a watch with we'll call it a bird with a broken wing, and bring it back to life, maybe fix the balance staff, and make it alive again. That's a great pleasure. And I think a lot of people have stories that resonate with how there's a combination of all these categories that make it so pleasurable to be in this world.
Yeah, I don't know if it's my age, but I think going to flea markets, going to some antique stores is a great way to learn about the history of something. Because you see so many things, and eventually something is going to catch your eye, and you're going to look at it and think, oh, how did this come by? So I love going to these flea markets, and just, it's almost like a time capsule. You're transported in that little store to that era. So I think it's a great way, if there's parents out there, to get your children into history, understanding, have that interest in history, take them to a flea market, and they're going to find maybe even like a toy or something that they resonate with and want to know more about.
No, that's well said. And for any of you, when you're traveling in Geneva, when we could travel a bit more, you have to go to the Geneva flea market on Saturdays and Sundays. Every time I go there, I find some sort of horological treasure, and it's obviously at the epicenter of watchmaking. There's a lot of watch and clock related ephemera. So I encourage.
I think if we go, John,
Long
we're going to have to go with you. We're going to have to go with you. But I'm not going by myself.
Long is thinking. Thank God we're not releasing this before we hear it ourselves. Like,
no, I'm also thinking. I'm also thinking, will these guys get mad at me because you guys are dying to go to the flea market, but I'm like, please let me eat breakfast before we go.
Every minute counts.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question though.
Yes.
Talking about parents and like encouraging kids to go to the flea market. I read this article where I can't tell if it's exaggerated, but the whole story was about how you had a basement and you were fixing clocks in a basement. Okay, so there's 2 points, because I'm kind of embarrassed to bring this up, because basically I was saying that at 5:30 was dinner time. So I was asking Dan and Jacqueline, hey, this guy has dinner at 5:30. Isn't that really strange? Because 5:30 is like snack time for us in Asia. Okay, so that's not the point. But the point was,
I will address
so you got to address that point. And the second thing was, in the article, they said your dad basically was like, shouted at you and was like, you're never going to make a living out of like clocks and watches. And I just want to know whether that kind of spurred you to go, okay, I'll show you, or it kind of it didn't affect you, it just hurt you.
Wow. Yeah. Now we're getting deeply psychological. Great question. but first we'll address 5:30 dinner time.
Yeah.
Growing up in Connecticut, my father was a principal of an elementary school at that time, and he'd arrive home from work around 4:30, and we would have dinner every night at 5:30, and we were expected to all have dinner together. Now, even in our house now, we don't have dinner seemingly till 7:30, 8 every night. But it's interesting looking back at time in time, having dinner so early. It was nice, but from a family point of view, having dinner together was just so key. And with my two sisters and my parents, and they're very pleasant memories. And it was probably the last time I ate dinner in the daylight, because of the past. Thanks for bringing up that incident with my father. My dad was and is the most supportive, loving father imaginable. Yet I still remember that one incident where I was just obsessed with putting together and finishing this job, and we've all been there. I was just trying to put the plates and match the pivots on this clock, and I ran home from school and was working on it. It was a very difficult job for me at that time, and one slip of the fingers and just hours of work is gone. And I remember him just like screaming down the stairs, "Johnny, it's time for dinner," and it just escalated from there. And I do remember finally, he was so upset with me, finally going upstairs, and I was probably 10 minutes late for dinner, 5:40. And he just let me have it, because family dinner was sacred, and it was unacceptable for any reason that I was late. And I don't remember his exact words, but it was something along the lines as I wouldn't make a living from it. Now, I don't even know if that's true or not, but I remember it as true. And I do remember that drove my my passion towards learning more about this world. We all react sometimes against our parents' wishes. I see it with my own children often. And parents do have a way, now that I am a dad, of you let your kids find their way, and you can kind of tweak them with reverse psychology here and there. And I wonder if that's what my father was doing. My father also inspired me to write books, because he wrote a series of books about how to raise children. So
must have dinner at 5:30.
Yeah, that was rule number one.
Like not 5:40, 5:30.
5:30. So he was at that point very well known in the States as like the ultimate dad, and I worshipped every word that he said and wrote, and so it meant a lot to me that he told me that I could not make a living out of watches.
Right. With that goes on beautifully to my next question, because you did actually make a career out of watches. You worked at Patek Philippe, Sotheby's, Christie's, they are the top names in the industry.
Yeah.
What has been the pinnacle of your career so far?
Wow. I mean, the time spent at Patek Philippe was, precious. It was, for me in particular, helping host the tours of top American retailers to Patek Philippe Geneva. We'd bring over groups of, I remember I took over a group of the top Tiffany clients, and another trip, the top Betteridge clients from Connecticut. Those trips are magical. There were 4 days together with top collectors from this part of the world, and I've remained friends with these folks over the years. And it was amazing seeing how each tour that we gave of the factory and then the museum, the result was always the same. This group of collectors would always say, Patek Philippe doesn't charge enough for their watches. They're like, every single watch, and it's not just the Nautilus, which I hope we could talk about later. It's definitely not just the Nautilus. It's every single watch represents incredible value to the end consumer. And that's the takeaway after people go kind of behind the curtain at Patek Philippe. And to this day, they give these tours and people walk away just in amazement. And it is, for those of you who've watched the Willy Wonka movies, It's exactly like that when you're going in the depths of the factory and seeing how things are made. And there's so much wonder, excitement, and surprise around every corner. And that to me was a highlight. I'll never forget those days. But in the auction world is defined by highs and lows. I would say many of my most exciting, amazing experiences were at auction, and some of my worst professional experiences were at auction, because it was just so unpredictable what would happen during every sale. And I had times where consigners would run up during an auction and start screaming at me. I remember that from the late 90s, that they're disappointed that their watch brought so little. And then at other times where people would literally be crying after a sale saying, "You changed our lives and you're putting our kids through school with the sale of this watch." And that's always a pleasure. It's funny though, you remember the complaints more than the praise.
Yes. Yes. But using the Willy Wonka analogy, I think, I'd be one of those kids that never made it to the end, because I'd be locked into the bracelet making machine, and I turn out as a bracelet, or I'd probably be that fat kid that, I don't know, got lost in the canteen or something. I don't think I would have made it to the end. Yeah, Long, please.
I have so many questions. Okay, so I have two questions. One is do they prep the factory people that, hey, we have guests today, so can you behave a certain way? I know that's strange. Okay, I'll tell you why. Because when I went to the AP factory, so they have the people that use the wooden sticks just to polish. Just to polish and file finish. Parts, right? And I remember thinking, if this is your job, why are you wearing so many bracelets? Honestly, I was thinking that. Because there's no way, if you're doing something so delicate, why would you have all the stuff dangling? So I thought they must have told them in advance, like, hey, we have a guest from Asia coming.
I thought you were going to say the last time you were in Cartier, and then there was this old dude that you thought was an actor that they hired to be the watchmaker.
That is true. That is true. Because he didn't know anything. So he had to be an actor. Okay, you have to explain this to John. Basically, I went to a Cartier event, and it was a watch event, and but they also invited a lot of the women and try and sell jewelry to them. But this is just when the crash was getting very popular. So I had one intention. I was going to go there and secure my crash. So I told my friend who set up the event, hey, where is this watch specialist that you said was coming? So this really old Chinese guy came, and I started talking to him, and I was like, hey, look, I'm very interested in the crash. And he's like, what? And I was like, crash? So he's very confused. So I Google it, this watch. And then I realized, wait, he doesn't know what I'm talking about. So I just came to the conclusion, you're an actor, because they must have hired you, because you look very wise, and, you didn't think anyone was going to ask you questions. So they just
was at a central casting. You bring up a wonderful point, is how much with these factory tours or exhibitions that we're seeing around the country, and I'm not talking just about Patek Philippe, how much of it is staged and show. And over the last 10 years, it's definitely more increasingly staged. I mean, I don't want to pick on any other brands, but I've seen some things that it's oh, come on. It is, like you said, they hired someone to give the audience what they want. At Patek Philippe, I think they were kind of, when they first opened up the factories to tours, they've always done them, but when they formalized the program in the early 2000s, the staff was not briefed and unexpected things happened. I remember during my first tour, this would never
taking a nap.
There was a watchmaker who had a number of inappropriate, shall we say, inspirational photos on the wall. It helped him polish his pivots, if I could put it that way.
Are you serious?
That's amazing.
One of my collector friends took pictures of it, because I was like, I didn't see it, and he had a picture on his BlackBerry or whatever he had at the time, and I was like, oh my god, that is horrible for the brand. They can't have that. And So of course that picture circulated, and we were all laughing.
That's
I would do anything to find that picture again. The guy with like the Patek Philippe. So, and sure enough, when I went back a few months later, that gentleman in those pictures were gone. And I don't know the backstory, unfortunately, but it shows how, in the little example, how Patek Philippe figured out you need to put on the show when you have end consumers going through and having access to the factory. On another extreme example of that, I remember on that same first visit, there was a woman whose job it was to polish one particular case back. This is what she did for a living. She polished this case back, and a gentleman, one of my collector friends, went up to her and through a translator said, "Oh, I have the watch where that case back, I think it was a perpetual, goes to." And she looked at the watch. In her whole life, she never saw the completed product. She never saw what the watch looks like when it was finished.
Wow.
So she held up the case back that she was working on and compared it. He took the watch off his wrist, so she was able to see her own work on his watch, and she started crying. It was beautiful because she felt went full circle and connected to the collector. The collector still will remember this for the rest of his life because it shows that there's a human being making these pieces. And those unscripted moments are other high points that I'll never forget. That's what makes Patek Philippe so magical.
Wow, what a story.
I know.
I'm
feeling
touched.
like
I feel emotional after hearing that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I could bring tears to your eyes in this podcast. We've done something.
We should do another one called Tears in Your Eyes.
Yeah.
No, we should do another one. See who cries first. Oh wow.
Oh wait, second question about your interview with Patek. I want to know, because I know that it was a long process, right? And the location was like a secret, right? So are you allowed to say where you did the interview, and how did you find the person, or the person found you and you were just sitting there? Yeah.
All right. Now, I'm not going to make you cry, but hopefully I can make you laugh of how gullible I am. In high school, and I hope he's listening, because I'll never forget this kid. I was sophomore year, and I was at home having dinner at 5:30. At 5:45, the phone rang, and a gentleman identified himself as Mr. Avocano from Harvard University. He said, and actually my father fell for it because he picked up the phone. So this is Mr. Avocano. We're so happy with how well your son is doing that Harvard would like to accept him early admittance to Harvard University for a full scholarship. And then after speaking to my father for 5 minutes, he spoke to me, and this guy absolutely convinced me. And by the way, Harvard just doesn't call you if you don't apply to get into a college. But I believed it because it was just so amazing. And he ended up, he's like, okay, we'll call you back tomorrow night. He called back the second night, and we were still believing it. It turned out to be one of my classmates pulling a prank on me. And he had us all going. And I remember the kid's name. I should find him on Facebook because I want him to listen to this podcast. I remember, and I will have my vengeance. So,
in this life or the next.
Yes.
I can just can I say something?
Yes.
I can just picture the second night, John, his parents, and his two sisters sitting around the sofa after dinner at 5:30, just waiting for the phone to ring. And then it finally rang. And then John hurriedly ran up to it and started speaking to Mr. Alvo or something.
Avocano. I remember the name.
Yeah.
So the reason I tell you the story, long, which is very funny, is because when I was contacted by Patek Philippe while working at Sotheby's, the first phone call, I was like, oh, that little prick calling me. I was like, yeah, right. Patek Philippe is calling me for an interview to meet at a secret location. So I remember I was like, I'm never going to fall for this trick again. And I was a little sarcastic with this. It was this, I forgot her name. It was a headhunter. And I was like, yeah, right. I'll meet you at this bar. I think it was like 6 p.m. It was late for me, really late at night. So I remember leaving work and meeting her. I think it was actually at La Grenouille in New York at the bar. I've never been in there before. And I went in and sat with her, and we had this, it was an hour-long conversation. And then I was like, I still thought it was a prank. I was like, he hired someone. He hired this to do this. I was like, this is brilliant. I was like, this kid really must dislike me. So then I met with her a second time. And only after getting past that second interview, I was able to have a phone call from Hank Edelman, then president of Patek Philippe USA. And it was only at that point that I knew I wasn't being pranked. And the interview process was done.
Weren't you like, he paid Hank as well?
Yeah. So now I know when we're having dinner at my house and someone calls and offers my son a full scholarship, I'm not going to believe you at all.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
That's
but it was
amazing.
it was a grueling process, and I didn't expect I would go to Patek Philippe, and it was a dream come true. And the final interview was by Tanya Edwards. Tanya was vice president of Patek Philippe at the time, head of marketing and PR, and we had a very long conversation. And I knew, I was sure it wasn't a prank, because if I made it that far, I spoke to half the people at Patek Philippe USA. And I remember she gave me some really good advice about how the ethical part of working at Patek Philippe, it's a lifestyle job. It's certainly not a 9-to-5 job. And the values of the company are everything. Literally every employee has to follow the values set forth by Philippe Stern at that time. And full circle, now at Collectability, my first colleague is the same Tanya Edwards. And, and we think back at those amazing those times at the Henry Stern agency that we were able to work together, and now we're able to work together again. So it's a bit of a dream come true.
So cool.
John, with you're saying that Patek Philippe was such a highlight and such a special moment. What was it like to leave Patek Philippe? Wow,
it was actually a beautiful moment. The president, when I left, Larry Pettinelli, had I remember he got a cake, and the 50 of us who worked for the company came together, and they sent me off with good wishes and with smiles. It was an unexpected surprise that the company came together for this this gesture I'll never forget. It shows just how amazing these people that are, who are still friends to this day. But especially at that point when I was there, you don't leave the company. When you work for Patek Philippe, you're there for life. In particular, with Patek Philippe USA, if you work for Henry Stern Agency, you stay at Henry Stern Agency. I think now that's changed a bit. There's a lot of people coming and going, and it's more a reflection of how times have changed in the workplace. People don't necessarily stay at a job for life. But at that point, I actually believed I would have stayed at that company for the rest of my life. And I'm so glad I didn't, in a way, because I've been able to pursue my interest in Patek Philippe in a way outside, more so than if I was on the inside. The one thing that's very true working for a Swiss company, any Swiss company, is what you're hired for, your job, you stay within the margins for that job for forever. It's basically, if you're a watchmaker, you're going to be a watchmaker. If you're a marketing person, you'll be a marketing person. There's very little crossover. Perhaps I was a little too ambitious because I wanted to be a historian. And if your job is selling modern Patek Philippe, trying to be the historian for Patek Philippe at the same time is at odds with each other. So that's essentially why I left, and they were amazing about it, and to this day I keep in contact with all my friends there. It's great.
John, you seem to manage your professional career very well. That's what it comes across, and also the relationships you've made in the industry. What advice would you give to some of the younger audience listening? Because we do get very young collectors on this podcast.
I'm in no position to give life advice, but the bottom line is, and it's just my opinion, is never burn a bridge. And one thing I've learned in life, it could be a teacher in high school, it could be your first job out of college. Don't let emotions get in the way and burn a bridge. In today's digital world, people are sometimes posting comments, or they might send a text or email or WhatsApp, and out of anger or emotion, and you're gonna live to regret that 9 out of 10 times. So I suggest just burn no bridges. And some of the people I've closest to as my closest clients are people that went through bad experiences, maybe at auction, and we found a way to make it right. You always remember when someone goes the extra mile to make something right, and that's what builds not only friendships but professional relationships. And in the watch world, everybody knows everyone. Everyone's reference checking as they should, and asking, is this a good person? Is this someone I could work with? And if you're breaking into this industry, just be mindful of your digital footprints, and also just your the way you conduct business with people. Nothing will be forgotten, seemingly.
Yeah.
Right. I do want to go on and mention Collectability, which is the platform that you're working on now. It's a platform that you started by yourself, and I think Tanya.
Yes.
What made you start Collectability?
Wow. Tanya and I have been discussing for years the possibility of having a company that existed separately and independently of Patek Philippe, that focused on pre-owned and vintage Patek Philippe. The rise of social media, and just it's easier now to do YouTube videos or podcasts than ever before, really just opened the door for us to share the message, the experiences, and sharing the education that we've learned and are constantly learning about the brand. And it's amazing to me that it doesn't exist today in the world. There's really no place to go. The most common question I get is that I've received in my career is, how do I learn more about Patek Philippe? Like you said, the books are a great place to start, but where do you go from there? You can go to the auction houses. The auction catalogs are amazing. Going to auctions is a great way to connect with the community, but there's really no place online where you can go and truly learn and study. And we're still at the very beginning of what Collectability is going to do, but we've had a good start over the last 2 years of really building an educational platform that will expand, and over the coming years, I think it'll be one of the leading resources for the brand that someone could go to and actually not only learn about your watch, but maybe about your next watch, or just maybe you want to study the history of design from a case perspective, a movement perspective, or to dive deep into dials. The longer Collectability exists, I think it's like a fine wine. It's going to get better because there's going to be more content where people can go down rabbit holes to learn about whatever they're looking for.
That's fantastic. So you're also a collector as well, though. So you sell vintage watches, you educate, but you're also a collector as well. What do you collect?
Well, outside of the world of Patek Philippe, advertisements and ephemera, which I still can't stop buying that. Just even this morning, I bought just a whole bunch of bizarre parts, obscure parts to Gyromax balances. I mean, I'm always looking for that kind of thing.
Okay, you still have the storage facility.
Yes, I still do. In an undisclosed location, full of all sorts of random Patek Philippe stuff. I also personally collect 17th century English long case clocks, which is way outside of what I would normally do in the world of collectability. it's like a personal pleasure. I find early English horology fascinating. And I think I will build on that collection over the years. And that market is so soft right now. You can buy the best of the best for nothing, for less than it would have cost 10, 15 years ago. And it's a good reminder to me that all markets don't continue going upward. And that's important from a collectability perspective. Know that if what was it 15 years ago, people were breaking world records with Beanie Babies in a way that I see the same people seemingly chasing steel sports watches. And it's a good lesson to learn. It's not guaranteed these are going to be what you collect will be worth more in the future. So you really have to get to the core of what makes it collectible to you and to buy what you love and not what you're told to love.
That's a great way to finish the main interview. Like, I really enjoyed that. We now go on to the next side, which is the reverso round. John, you have 3 questions that you can ask us.
Oh my gosh. Who goes first? So,
the ladies first.
all right, Jacqueline, have you ever made a mistake with a watch that you've bought?
Oh man. A mistake. I mean, to be honest, I don't think I've been buying that many to have made a mistake yet. I think I'm fortunate. I think I'm lucky to say that with every purchase decision, I've made it with thought and as much emotion attached at that given moment. But I don't think I've ever regretted it. Not and even if I don't own the watch anymore, I don't regret like ever owning it. So maybe not yet, and knock on wood, hopefully it won't happen. But I mean, in terms of like mistake or regrets, I do have like regret selling than buying. Like now I look back and I flip in through my phone. I was like, oh, why did I let that go? Like it was so perfect. Why did I let that go? But then I guess as a part of the whole process, like I was thinking about this recently. Like if I were given the choice of keeping 3 watches that I no longer own, but I could like buy back, I know exactly what they would be. And then I beat myself up over it, and I was like, yeah, just don't look forward to the next thing. Yeah. And even with Patek in general, like I remember when I first met Daniel and Long Long, and I think like one of the questions Dan asked me in the pre-call was, you own pieces from different brands, how come you don't own a Patek Philippe yet? And I don't remember the rough the exact answer, but I think the rough thing that I told Dan was like, oh, because the namesake, right? It's so like it's sacred. Just yeah, and I don't think I'm at a position and at a age where I simply can find something that I think that I believe I'm good enough for it yet. But then now thinking back to it, it was really just I haven't found what I was looking for, and I was a little bit scared off by the name until I saw actually a story that Charlie, who we're going to interview soon, posted of collectability of that watch that Charlie I bought Dunn. From you. Yeah, Charlie Dung. And I've heard of collectability before, and it was completely random. It's by this friend in Korea. He actually sent me your website, and at that time I didn't know they had an Instagram or YouTube. I think you haven't even set up your YouTube account at that time yet. And then I was like, oh yeah, I know of this website. How come I'm not following it on Instagram? And then I saw his story highlight. It was that watch from 1926 that I bought from you. And I was like, this is so different. And I'm like a vintage geek at heart, because I love history and the past and stories. This is so cool. So I sent you that email. You probably don't remember, but because of the time difference, I sent it at like 2:00 in the morning. So it was like really early for you. And then you replied me around like 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. New York time. And then, but I was sleeping. So then I woke up and I saw your reply. I was like, oh my God, he replied me, but it's like 6 hours ago. What if it's sold? So then I texted so then I texted you. I was like, hey John, like it's Jacqueline. And then we jumped on a call. Do you remember?
I remember,
and then I told you, please hold it for me. And then you were very generous and you said, yeah, sure, I'll remove it from Chrono 24 first, and then we can settle the payment options later, which we did. And like still now I bought a new lens recently, and I was looking at dials and movements and case back like hallmarks through the macro lens. So then I took that out, that watch out, and I took a macro video of it. Just the dial of that is amazing. It's my first, and I guess long way back to Dan's question, the reason why I didn't own a Patek Philippe at that time was because I simply didn't find one that suited me or that I found that resonated with me. And to those who are listening, yes, Patek is Patek, but if you want to like own a piece of horological history, it doesn't have to be tens of thousands of dollars. It can be something quirky, and that just simply speaks to you, and that's a beautiful way to start. So yeah.
Wow. Okay, it's going to take some doing to get an answer past that one, John.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, Long, you're next. So first of all, what time do you eat dinner?
Wow. The correct question should be dinner. The question should be like, how long is your dinner? It starts from like 7 till like 11. No. Okay, so I try and do like 7:30. Yeah.
Wow. Excellent. Okay. Well, I'm asleep by then. So, how many of these podcasts have you done to date?
Okay, so we have released like 61 episodes, but we actually have a backlog. So I would say coming 70.
Wow.
About 70, yeah.
All right, and then my ultimate question is, with these 71 interviews, what was the most embarrassing, or we'll just say, we'll stick with embarrassing.
Okay, embarrassing. Moment?
You should have asked, like, that's not true. You should have asked the question, what's like the embarrassing moment of each episode?
Wait, let me think. I don't remember any moments where.
Well, the thing is, it's because we laugh it off, and then most of the time we have our embarrassing moments off the camera, right? Like that's not being recorded. So before we do a recording, or when we just finished the intro, like group intro talk chat with the guest, and then like something always happens, and then we record, and it's very hard for us to like jump from a place of like silliness and embarrassment to like seriousness. And that's why the transition, usually sometimes we record the intro 5-6 times to get it right.
Okay, wait, I can think of something now, but it wasn't our podcast. I was getting interviewed by Watchbox.
Okay.
Okay. So when we had set up, he's never going to listen to this podcast, so I can say this. When we had set up the call, we thought that he was interviewing us because we had already interviewed him. So it was his turn to interview us. Mm-hmm. So I was like very relaxed, like, okay, he's going to interview me. And then
wait, like 5 minutes
before, Tim also.
Wait,
and then 5 minutes before the call, he's like, so do you have your questions ready? And I was like, what questions? I thought you were interviewing me. Okay, so he's like, no, I was told that you were interviewing me. So I was like, hey, it's cool, like let's just reschedule, it's fine, right? He's like, no, we gotta do, you know how he has this whole like, we can
mentality,
do this,
yes,
yes. Like, like I was in the Navy SEAL, we can do this kind of thing. So I was like, all right, I can act like I'm from the Navy SEAL, right? So I was like, let's just do it. And then so we're talking, And you can tell
Oh, you
it's like,
told
well,
me
if you
about
know
this.
me, like Dan knows me, Dan has heard this episode. It's just me like rambling. He's rambling. And then at one point, I'm so exhausted. And I thought they were gonna edit this. So I was like, okay, I have no more questions for you. And then it was silent. And they never edited it out. like
It was really
they-
funny. It was
Oh,
really
yeah,
funny.
it was really it was
It was
they just
really
left
funny
it.
because it was like, I think
Like-
I've run out of questions now or something.
Yeah, I was like,
That's a
I have
good
nothing
ending.
left to say. Yeah, I was like, I have nothing left to say. But then after that, he just continued by
Yeah,
himself.
yeah, he did. Yeah, he just went off on his own. Yeah, I remember listening
Yeah.
to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Um,
one podcast I should listen to today that you've done. Which one is it?
Man.
Ooh.
That's unfair, I know.
Oh, that's a tough one. There's so many good ones.
Yeah, there's so many
Even
good
if you
ones.
ask us,
Yeah.
even you ask us separately, we have our own favorites. That's the thing. Ooh.
Okay, because like I like really heavy topics. I love the ones where I'm really like it gets me thinking. And the one that like we just released,
Yeah, that's a good one.
he's a co-founder of Beyond the Dial, and he's called James, and he was talking about like being an Asian in America, right? And I just thought it was very appropriate, like given what's happening. And you listen to it, and this is after it was edited, because with this episode we had spoken for I think another hour after we were done.
After, yeah.
Yeah. And we were so engaged. And when I listened to it, like everything he said, I was just like, yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That particular episode, the last one, it's the one by James Wren.
Yeah.
We got a lot of feedback from that, and all positive. Everybody, it resonated with a lot of Asian Americans. And then the topic that was discussed brought light on a topic that, if you're Caucasian in America, you might not have thought about. So how and the mentality of Asians and collectors, and how they approach things. So it gives light on that. So that's quite a good one. Right, my question, or have I got away with
and
it?
this is a follow-up, because now you have me thinking. How do you find the global auction houses are doing marketing to Asia? And is there any standout
Oh, that's a great question.
auction houses? One of them that gets it right, and others that get it wrong.
I'm going to take this as my question.
Yes, this is for
Yeah,
you, Daniel.
yeah.
Oh, it is for me. So you gave me
Yeah.
like the banana skin. I would say generally not that well. So I'm in China, where there's a lot of the main collectors are China. I know they pick the pieces up in Hong Kong, but there's a huge population in China that is not awake to vintage watches.
Mhm.
So there is a dormant market there, and it's not getting stimulated enough. And I think that it's very hard for them to penetrate the market, because you really, really need to know what you're talking about with vintage watches. But how do they cross that cultural? And mainly the main issue is the language barrier. So you have to find an individual that is as passionate as you, John, can navigate not only the Chinese market, but also report back to the auction house, right, with the results. So they have to have that European kind of flavor. So makes it very difficult. And the knowledge as well, right? So I think I would say across the board, not that good. I would say Philips is the most approachable one out of all of the auction houses right now, because of the team that they have. I think with the way they engaged me in particular, how they kind of invited me to the previews, and then how they understand how the collector community kind of worked in Asia. So we went down with the friends. We had that less of a, if you just go by yourself, it's quite difficult to do. It's quite, you're in awe and a bit uncomfortable. But if you go down with friends that might have been there before, they might be very well familiar with the auction setup. It's a lot easier, and you can just have fun. So I think Philips does a good job on that, but there's just so much to do. If you think about a lot of these auction houses don't really have a presence in China. I looked at Philips's WeChat account just before I came online today, because I saw an article, And I looked at that article, and I looked at the article before, and the article's only got like 300 views, you know, in the Chinese market. It's nothing, right? So I think there's a lot of room there, and a lot of room for platforms like yourself, like Collectability, you know, because very approachable. You navigate a space which makes your Patek Philippe far more approachable than an auction house, quite frankly. Yeah. So that's my answer. Right, we now go to the pump push around. Okay. Right. Number one, which advert that you've collected is your favorite?
Oh, wow. How many seconds do I have to answer? Is this like Jeopardy?
No, there's no.
My favorite ads are ones where they spell the brand name wrong, like Philippe with 2 L, 1 P. And they've consistently had that problem. I've seen spelling mistakes from the 1850s all the way to the 1980s.
Wow.
In Patek Philippe ads. So it's kind of like an upside down postage stamp, is that they made a significant mistake. But the classic ad for me, and it's actually not an ad, it was an image, the Associated Press image, was Warren Buffett holding the caliber 89 while wearing, he actually had a 3944 quartz Calatrava hobnail bezel. And I think it was marketed as something like the $1 billion man with $1 million watch or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And that was shot circa 1990. So I love things like that capture a time and place.
Yeah.
Great. Number two, would you have changed anything in your career pathway?
Wow. I probably would have gone out on my own earlier.
Okay.
If I was to do this all over again. I was so afraid to start my own business. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel that same way. It's tricky taking the leap and starting from scratch. But if I did it over again, I would have gone out on my own 5 years earlier.
Okay. Number three, person you would have loved to meet but never had the chance to do so.
I have to say Henri Stern. When I was working for the Henry Stern Watch Agency, he would stop in New York once per year on his way to his vacation home in St. Thomas in the Caribbean. So he'd fly from Switzerland, New York, and then down to the Caribbean. And I remember it like it was like slow motion. I looked up from my office and saw him walking by, just like a ghost. And he passed away soon after that. But I never actually met him or shook his hand. I wish I did.
John, you're so romantic. I mean, you must get many people into tears, honestly.
I have to say, like, seriously, when you told the story of the case back polisher lady, I had a little like warm and fuzzy like feeling around my eyes. It was, I mean,
beautiful.
Yeah, it made me want to visit the factory like even more. It's something that we always talk about, but have you guys been? Have you guys been?
I haven't. I've gone to even the museum though. Like, I just don't feel like one day is enough. Like, you need like 3 days. Yeah.
And with the museum, you just need to go with someone that could tell you the unofficial stories behind each piece. They have an amazing new audio tour with iPads, which Dr. Freese.
Yeah, I've done the earphone ones, but then I think you need to go with people that understand, like, just leave me alone for one day. Like, I can't leave this place. The people I went with were like, okay, like, it's been how many hours? Like, can we please leave?
Yeah, like tick box, Patek Philippe. Yeah. If you go with a group of people, it's like, okay, we're all there, but we're all listening to it. It brings a different spin on it.
You just gave me an idea for the ultimate podcast. We do a walk through the museum, and who should we have? We have Osvaldo Patrizzi. We have Darren Schnipper from Sotheby's, and Aurel Box, and they'll share all the stories of the watches from a commercial side, walking through the museum. Because every one of those watches has a reputation, a story behind it. But Patek Philippe's never going to tell you that side of the story. They're going to be more of like art technology. But the commercial side and the blood sport of how that watch ended there, that's the story.
So like the 2499p is in the museum, right? And you can see it there?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, the other one. One was
the other one
one with the museum.
The other one, yeah. And you
Right.
sold the 24.99p, right?
No, that was right when I was signing on to Christie's. That
That was right.
but that was
then
Orel.
Orel sold it. Yeah.
Yes, with all Orel.
Yeah.
Okay, number 4. If you weren't in the watch industry, what would you be doing?
History teacher.
At
Okay.
Harvard.
Yeah. What oh, gee. Or I'd be tucked away in some psych ward somewhere. But
Number 5. What was your dream job in the watch industry?
wow, in the watch industry, I'm living it now. It's having my own, hanging my own shingle, and having a company where I'm engaging with clients in a non-commercial way. I remember at Sotheby's, my first performance review, my first job, I think I had the worst score imaginable. And I was told by the person reviewing me is because I spent too much time with the people that brought in inexpensive watches. So someone would bring in a Waltham worth $300, and I'd spend an hour with them, telling them everything about their Waltham. And the person with the Patek Philippe would have the same amount of time. But in the auction world, you can't do that. You need to focus on the profit, and time is money. But now that I have my own company, even with my small team, there's only 3 of us now, we're going to take that extra time to talk about your watch and your story. And that's a dream come true that no larger brand or auction house has the luxury of doing.
Wow, good answer. I love that answer.
Yeah.
Right. Next one. If you were going to write another book, what would it be on? Or would you even write another book?
Yes, I just completed a chapter, a 200-page chapter in a new book that's coming out. It's called Blue Book 5 by Eric Tortella. And I managed to put together 200 pages on the Patek Philippe ellipse.
Wow.
I had no idea that the ellipse had such a rich story. We talked about it a lot with collectability, but 200 pages was a pleasant surprise at the end of the day. And I'd like to pivot that into a standalone book. And I think we're going to talk about that, because it's a very difficult book to get. I think there's less than 100 copies will be published. So I want to take the ellipse part and make that more accessible to the world.
Okay. I look forward to reading that.
Yeah, I did.
There's at this rate, this podcast cannot go out, because we need to make sure we get all the stuff before it goes out. Yeah.
Let's just not release it.
Right. 2025.
Insider trading. You have to release this.
Right. The second to last question. A lot of our listeners are also book readers. Name one book that you would recommend not related to watches. It can be a fiction or a non-fiction book.
Well, I'm going to cheat with this answer and do a somewhat watch-related book that's really not about watches. And that's Stacy Perman's A Grand Complication. This book traces the battle between Henry Graves Jr. and James Ward Packard.
Oh, I'm going to love that.
Yeah.
The book really is not about watches at all. Stacy is an award-winning journalist, and she, in this book, tells a really interesting, intellectually stimulating story about the mind of collectors coming from very different perspectives. It's not for watch people. It's not really a read. Some people, it's like a read for just someone that's interested in history and psychology, with the backbone of watches. So highly recommended for all.
Okay.
A Grand Complication.
A Grand
Yeah,
Complication.
Is this limited as well?
This.
No, this one's easy to get.
Okay.
I think it's like $20 on Amazon. So
Okay.
it's a must read. Oh, I love that book. So
Okay. And the last question, very simple. What do you do to wind down from watches?
oh wow. It's time with the kids. We have a beautiful golden retriever, and just walking around the neighborhood and spending time with family is that's what it's all about. It's more
Yeah.
important than what's on our wrist.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I've really enjoyed the interview, John. It was a pleasure to interview you. That is the end of the interview. Please make sure you check out John's website and Instagram page, which is Collectability. And he can also be found at John Reardon 570 on Instagram. Also, make sure you subscribe to our channel on whatever platform you're listening to. And if you'd like to reach out to any of us, you can find us on the website, thewaitinglistpodcast.com, and also our Instagram handles, Long Turn, Mr. Daniel Sam, and at A Dose of Time. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much, John. It was
Thank
really
you,
a pleasure.
John.
Thank
Thank
you all.
you.
Have a good night.
Thank you for tuning in to the Waiting List podcast. Hit the subscribe button and the next episode will come straight to your phone as soon as it's ready. Whilst I'm here, please remember to leave a nice review and follow us on Instagram at the Waiting List Podcast.